Who are we covering now, Vern?
Paul Revere.
Oh,
Yeah,
the famous guy.
the famous guy, and yet not much is known about him from the standpoint of what we learned in class.
On the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere.
Pretty much it, and of course, as we covered in the 4 sections of the videos we did in Lexington and Concord, it was a great poem, but not that accurate. However, it helps us to remember the event for sure.
So what kind of a person is this man?
Strongly opinionated, intelligent, disciplined, very ambitious, forward-thinking. Actually, technology, he's pushing technology all his life.
Wow.
Okay, there is adversity going against him, but he makes his way around it. And he's got a large family. His house is next to Francis Shaw's house. When we
Who
talk,
had house Pitcairn?
that had house Pitcairn, and
He's the neighbor of
and
Paul
he's the neighbor.
Revere.
Yes, how about that? See, well, Boston isn't that big.
Okay.
Sandy and I have walked around there. We have pictures of that.
Okay.
Going on, so it's not that big.
So does this guy grow up in Boston? Is he a Boston?
He does, and raised, and by the age 14, his education was done, and then he began to apprentice with his father. But his father dies when he's 19.
What does his father do?
Silversmith.
So he's a silversmith.
So he can't start a business till he's 21. So what's he going to do as a result of that? And so he joins the Army because
Is this during the time of the French and Indian War?
It is French and Indian War. Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So so like all the kids join the Army.
A lot of them. And of course, he's in Boston, and he's involved in the French and Indian War that moves north to New York and into Canada.
All right.
He doesn't see combat, but he receives a pretty nice paycheck, so that when he comes back to Boston, and he's a very frugal person too.
He starts his business now?
Starts his business.
Because he's now probably 21.
I would assume that.
Okay.
Yes. That would, Dad dies in 54, the war is starting, it goes until 58 Forbes.
Okay.
With actually Braddock, Battle of Monongahela in 55. He's not with Braddock, he's north of that. Yeah,
Okay,
I saw you picking up. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting things. That's not one of them.
Okay.
Okay, but to put that in perspective,
Sure.
and so he's doing his thing, and he's making spoons and buckles for shoes, and
yes, they had buckles on their shoes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And buckles for the pants around the knees there, cups and all of those type of
Silver cups.
Yes, practical, but also some luxury items. He knows that he doesn't want to just focus on one thing. He wants to focus on more things and so we know he is a silversmith, and he begins to do very, very well because of his ability.
If it can be made out of silver, he's making it.
He's going to make it, and if there is a new technology, he's going to adopt that. So he's thinking ahead of other people that are just going to do the same thing over and over again.
Is he being successful?
He's being successful. In 1760, he becomes a mason. And so there are lots of contacts there. The Green Dragon, where the Sons of Liberty would meet in the basement, that was associated with the Masonic Hall as well. And a lot of these gentlemen...
I didn't know that.
Yes. A lot of these gentlemen...
And George Washington was a Mason, right?
He was, yes.
Okay. And so the Masons are involved in this struggle for freedom for America.
Oh, yes. Joseph Warren, who we talked about, was a Mason.
Oh, okay.
Many of the generals in the New England area were all Masons.
No one told me that.
Yeah. And so there's a built-in camaraderie there.
Sure.
And the cause of America was, for many of them, now each chapter is a little bit different. Chapters in Virginia are going to be different, kind of what they're in New England. But, this was part of
And the Green Dragon was the tavern where the Masons met and where the Sons of Liberty met, who also happened, some of them were Masons as well.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Now, not 100%.
Sure, I understand. So he's working his way up socially in Boston.
Yes.
Now what?
Then comes the Stamp Act, and his income falls about 40%.
Why does the Stamp Act affect him? He's not doing paper. Or is it because no one has any money, so they can't afford to buy anything in silver?
I didn't dive deep into that.
Yeah.
There, but of course
I'm guessing everybody's feeling a pinch, and so 40%, that's your...
Oh, that's huge.
That's, yeah.
Because if you recall, the Non-Importation Acts started in that area. I forget exactly what year. There were 2 or 3 of them.
And they're affecting him.
And they're affecting
his business.
There. And so that's why, and not only him, but of course John Hancock would be impacted by the different acts.
Why?
Well,
what does
because
Hancock do?
Hancock is an import-exporter.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That would have crushed him.
It would have. His father was a minister, and his father hoped that John would go into that, but John went elsewhere. So
warehouses.
As well as
Did
an
Revere
excellent
know
businessman.
Hancock, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because Hancock was a son of Liberty as well as Sam Adams.
Okay.
And they were probably
I don't know
meeting.
who the Sons of Liberty are. I just knew it was a
all right.
secret organization.
Secret organization,
Okay.
yeah.
So Hancock's losing money. Revere's losing money. They're sitting at the Green Dragon Tavern, and I can understand it now.
That's part of it. But not only are they, but everybody that works for them. You know, so if you're in Boston and working on ships, and all of a sudden there aren't as many of them because of these different acts, that impacts your bottom line. And so
sure does. The whole town is being affected.
So he's got to adapt as well during this time, but he becomes a son of liberty, gets involved the rest of the 60s, and then 1770, there's the Boston Massacre. So he's a silversmith, but he's also an artisan, okay? And so he does political artwork.
Like cartoons?
Well,
or paintings?
He did, well, he's a silversmith, and so the first images of the Boston Massacre of
He put them in silver?
Well, it is the plate where things were run out of. And so,
okay, for the printing press.
So maybe it wasn't silver, maybe it was copper, and
right,
I don't know that.
But he did that.
He's the one that did that, and they ran that.
That picture that I've seen in the books.
That's Paul Revere, political cartoon. I mean, you do what you can. So this guy is continually thinking outside of the box.
He is.
You know, so the massacre, but then 3 years later comes the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And so
the Sons of Liberty are doing that, right?
Well, was it a Sons of Liberty supported, or was it people associated with the Sons of Liberty? But now we're back to Sam Adams.
Yeah.
He's talking there. I don't know if it was I forget if it's the South Church or another meeting hall, but there are 4,000 or 5,000 people that are meeting, and they're waiting to see if Governor Hutchinson will back down in his insistence
that we buy that tea.
That either the tea is paid for or it is, unloaded. Okay, and so they're at the Old South meeting hall, and then the message comes that Governor Hutchinson will not relax it. And Sam Adams says, well, there's nothing more we can do here. Some people think that was the phrase that then the Sons of Liberty dressed up as Mohawks, that was the signal they needed. But others say, well, no, there was 15, 20 minutes that occurred afterwards in which he was trying to calm the crowd so that other things could be addressed but Sam stayed right there.
Okay.
And so it was maybe another group that did this, probably the Sons of Liberty. Revere was one of the Indians. Of course,
What?
yes,
Revere was one of the...
yes, Mohawks. Of course, it was totally silent. Nobody said anything for years and years, I think 60, 70, 80, 90 years, you know, and certainly...
Of who was actually involved in that.
Was, and they dressed up and everything because...
They didn't want to be blamed.
Well, they would have been hung.
Oh, yes.
Treasonous act.
Sure.
And so for many, many years, it was kept silent as to who was involved. The numbers are 50, some say 60, some says others.
How much tea did Paul Revere dump out?
We don't know personally.
But I mean, did all those guys dump out?
Well, 392, 394 chests, 92,000 pounds of 5 different types of tea. You can go to the Tea Museum in Boston. You can taste all 5 of those teas.
Really?
Yes, they've got 5 vats there that you just pour that and you get your little scones.
Did you try it?
We did it. How could you go there and not do that?
Did you know Paul Revere was one of the ones there?
At that time, I didn't. Because when I did my deep dive on Paul, and I need to know more about that, all of this stuff came up.
How do you drink a tea?
Isn't that interesting?
It is. It's
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
And you get to go on a replica of the Beaver, which was one of the 3. The Dartmouth is one of the 3 boats.
No way.
Yes.
They named a boat after Lord Dartmouth.
I don't know if it was after Lord Dartmouth or what have you.
One of his family.
One of his family. The Beaver was a second one, and I forget what the third one is.
Now I understand too why Lord Dartmouth said, "You boarded my boat."
That might be a side issue there.
It is really connected.
And I didn't put those together there, but that would be interesting. Yeah, so Revere is involved in that Tea Party as well.
So he is being more and more active way before his ride.
Exactly, but he had been a courier, the midnight ride.
He was a writer before that.
But yes, and he's carrying the news to the committees of correspondence. So that was one thing that was
Through the
organized
colonies.
through the colonies. But also he was on the Committee of Safety, which is the group that is more militaristic. They're the guys that do tar and feathering and other things like that. But as part of the Committee of Correspondence, the day after Lexington and Concord, he rides to New York.
To deliver the news.
Yes. And then he rides down to Philadelphia.
This is amazing.
Yeah, because the communication is so important. Just think about what the Gutenberg Bible did for the English-speaking world, and then what the cell phone does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, communication changes things, and so they knew that they had to communicate, and it changed things, and so he was involved in that very, very deeply.
This was very interesting.
But you know, when I talk about technology and other things, after the war, he got into casting. Different of the colonies wanted cannons. He learned to make cannons. And he brought different technologies.
A silversmith.
Yeah, he goes into, yeah. And then the Great Awakening in 1785,
Yes.
he started making church bells.
This guy is amazing.
But it doesn't stop there.
What?
He knows that in his foundry, he's got these skilled artisans, technicians, and they're working now with different materials to make a cannon or a bell. It takes a certain amount of time to do that, and then there's time in between. And so he knows that he can rather have them sitting around just drinking whiskey, that he can have them do other things in just silver. And so he's thinking ahead all the time. He also gives them flexible hours. Okay.
So you can, You can come when you need to and stay and leave when you need to. Revere, wow.
Ahead of his time.
Exactly.
He wasn't in charge and he was kind of a cohort and
So I've
worked
got
with him.
downtime here. Hey, I need to go shopping. I'm checking out, punching out, and I'm going to come back in.
That's right. And when you come and you work on a product that we sell, then you're going to be paid. You're going to be paid well, by the way. Okay.
He's a
for
good
doing it.
employer.
He is an excellent employer, and they know he's thinking ahead all the time. Well, now, so we begin to produce our own boats here in the colonies or the states. And in order for barnacles not to accumulate on the bottoms of boats, you put a metal sheathing, a copper sheathing.
Revere did that too?
He did that.
To me, that's an entire ship.
You've got to have a larger warehouse. You have to have rollers to roll this copper out in sheaths.
And then
it's got to be applied.
And stay on.
And stay on, yes. And repaired. He put the copper on the USS Constitution.
Paul Revere.
Paul Revere.
Ironsides.
So there's more.
Wow, this is
more
connected.
He also can be very brash, as I said, and opinionated, and he did create some enemies along the line that were probably less talented and were more impressed by their own thinking and talking. And quite frankly, Revere was very practical, and he had no time for people like that. So, there were parts of him that were abrasive, is the word that I saw a couple of times.
So, can you tell me anything else about Paul Revere?
Oh, I could tell you lots of things, but we'll just keep it a couple of things. So, he was also committed to being a Puritan, and at one point left the Congregationalists and was more involved with the Church of England or Anglican. And his father, and he didn't agree and actually came to blows. I think both men
are arguing over religion.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that explains the kind of person Paul is and his dad.
Yeah, he eventually came back to his father's faith. Some of the other things that he produced, at one point after the Stamp Act, he was so far behind on mortgages, he almost lost his home.
Oh.
Not only did he have a bunch of kids.
Yes, 6?
I believe it was more than that. I don't have a specific number.
Okay.
That's one of those little things that is bouncing around in there that hasn't surfaced yet. He had to pay mortgages, and so that's why he was motivated to do things now. But in his productions, he not only did the cannons and the church bells and what have you, but he also produced surgical instruments.
Wow.
Such as they were back then, and I don't know what they are.
I wonder if Warren used some of his instruments.
It's very possible because they were very, very close friends. Warren had a tooth that go missing, and Revere had been studying with a dentist that replaced teeth, and so he learned how to do that and replaced a tooth in Warren's mouth and wired it in there so that it looked good, and they also did spectacles.
Oh.
Yeah, so this guy he could
do if it could be made, he would make it.
And then he worked with other businesses so that they could share things, and he learned from them, they learned from him, and so they bonded together and did other products, and that's why he was always
he was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He really was.
So Joseph Warren.
Yes.
Who was a good friend, and 9 months after Warren was killed and buried on Bunker Hill, and the British left Boston finally, he went up and searched for Warren with Warren's brothers and others. They found him in a shallow grave. Well, actually, they dug up a shallow grave. There were 2 bodies in there. They were decomposed after 9 months, couldn't recognize it, but Warren recognized the wire that he put around the tooth.
So
That was-
Revere recognized the wire.
He's the one that identified Joseph Warren's body.
That's my work.
That's my work, yeah. So evidently the tooth was gone, but the wire was still there, excuse me. But then they gave him a proper burial. So that's more about
Paul Revere.
Paul Revere.
I imagine there are more books and stuff written about this man.
yes.
I can see. And this is a Bostonian through and through.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Revere, so there's French roots.
Oh,
to
Revere
him.
is French.
It's a derivative of French word, yeah. And I forget what it is. Well, Revere Van or something
Yeah.
like that, you know.
How about
But it
that?
would that. So now we know more about this very talented and patriotic man who did a midnight ride but didn't get to Concord. So that's Paul Revere.
Thank you.